So I basically just want to talk about the way that politics in Kingsman makes Kingsman 1 really, really good and Kingsman 2 kind of a flop, the way a lot of other elements in the movie make it a flop. So first, let's start with what makes Kingsman number 1 so good. The main theme is about an underdog, Eggsy, and how he has been oppressed basically because of the classism in Britain. Even though he's a really good kid, even though he started out with a father and mother who cared a lot about him, once he was in the estates, the American equivalent would be the projects, he was really basically trapped in something he could never get out of. Even though he tried joining the military, he eventually quit because his mother was afraid of losing him the same way that she had lost his father. When he's finally given an opportunity because of Harry and the past that Harry had with his father, that opportunity is really stymied and no one is rooting for him because of his background, because he doesn't come from a rich or well-blooded background. Now, the second theme that's kind of political in the movie is about the environmentalism that happens because of a corporate or elite entity taking matters into their own hand. Okay, so the bad guy is Valentine, played by Samuel L. Jackson. He's a tech genius who made all of his money through that sort of process. And what he intends to do is fix the environmental problems that we have. He claims that he first tried going through governmental means, but it just never really worked. So he decides to basically use these SIM cards to kill the vast majority of the population, except for a small group of great thinkers and political leaders that he has hand-chosen for being aware of these issues and good enough. Now, the movie makes it pretty clear that not all of these political leaders are very good. When Princess Tildy is captured, we see that the other politician who makes the cut is actually kind of a sniveling goon, and Princess Tildy is the, sympathetic character for turning him down because murder is bad. Well, Valentine is a combination, a chimera of Zuckerberg and Gates. He has some of the strange quirks that these characters are known for in popular media, such as his love of eating cheeseburgers or his great fear and germophobia. And he also shares their approach to philanthropy and large world problems. He doesn't have faith in bureaucracy. Valentine thinks that he can do things better because he was a genius in one particular field, and that technology and his personal wealth will serve him in any other problem. He doesn't go to the public. He doesn't seek to help others on a small scale. Instead, he believes that a large technological solution that he personally has come up with will fix everything. And he's not really open to, practical humanitarian or social science solutions. As well as the fact that the solution that he uses is a belief that the world is overpopulated. Now, you may believe this or you may not believe this, but obviously within the movie, the way that he chooses to skim the population is very wrong. As I said before, the characters who make the cut are already the blue-blooded people who have attracted his attention, as opposed to the common people like Eggsy's mom and little sister. The collateral damage of the solution is very large. I personally don't buy into the idea that overpopulation is the reason that we're destroying the environment. In fact, the countries that are consuming most of their resources have much smaller populations, and I think it's wrong to believe that the third world or emerging industrial powers should have to cut back in their population or technological advances simply because they came late to the game, whereas low population, industrial, and first world countries are allowed to continue consuming and never have to bear the brunt of their small populations taking an oversized cut of resources. But hey, that's just me. Now, part of the reason why Kingsman 1 works so well is that the underdog issue, as well as the elite solution to environmental problems, they tie together perfectly. The elite kids who make fun of Eggsy and who can't make the cut to actually get into Kingsman show up again, being selected by Valentine to survive the purge of the lowly plebes. And this tie-in is what makes the movie so good, and it's so upsetting that Kingsman 2 lacks this kind of cohesiveness. The main and very heavy-handed point in Kingsman 2 is about the war on drugs, specifically that America's war on drugs is bad. Now, I think a few people have thought that the president that they are parodying in Kingsman 2 is Trump, but that doesn't really make sense. The president doesn't look like Trump, he doesn't act like Trump, and the political views that Trump is most famous for are not those that the president in Kingsman 2 is tackling. Instead, it seems more reasonable to view the president as a mix-up and mash-up of Reagan and Bush Jr. We have all of the key things that those two politicians are well known for. The emphasis on the war on drugs, a lock-em-up mentality as a solution, and finally a sort of Christian crusade around those who end up using drugs. The president is willing to take those individuals, lock them up into cages, and then finally let them die because he believes that there can be a solution to drug use by simply letting people, the drug users, die. He doesn't actually approach the social issues, the supply side of things, or anything like that. No. If we just let them all die, then the problem will be fixed. If we just lock them all up, the problem will be fixed. I think that's point A, war on drugs. But what is the secondary point in Kingsman? We kind of sort of have this kind of romance plot with the princess from Kingsman 1 between her and Eggsy. Maybe it's the return of Harry. I think maybe the bigger theme that we're supposed to be getting is personal sacrifice, because it kind of ties into those the main subplots and the big emotional hit of Kingsman 2, which would be the death of Merlin. So Eggsy has to sacrifice his romantic relationship with the princess when he has to put in the recording and tracking device into the Golden Circle girlfriend. Harry has to give up his peaceful dream of becoming a butterfly studier because he needs to return to Kingsman and help them save the world. Merlin has to sacrifice his life in order to make sure that Eggsy and Harry can get into Poppy's, headquarters. Now, the problem with the secondary theme is that they don't ever really tie it together as strongly as the themes in Kingsman 1, and also a lot of these themes don't make a lot of logical sense within the movie. Eggsy and Tildy appear to live together and seem to have a really good relationship, communicating some of her frustrations with her dad being classist, and, Eggsy taking the time to call her in the middle of a mission. But you would think if they're living together and they have this really strong communication and he's literally willing to dive through shit, that Eggsy would have taken the time before to talk to Tildy about what he had to do in his job. Like, people with far less important jobs do that. Like, people who work as a, computer scientist do that. Just talk to her. And as far as the return of Harry, it doesn't really make sense that this is something that's so far delayed. You would think that Statesman could have just taken him back to the traumatic scene where he was first shot before the movie even began, therefore restarting his memories. You would think also that Merlin and Eggsy would have far more, common traumatic or difficult experiences with him, and that they wouldn't each try just one thing before giving up on him. Merlin probably knows more about Harry than just the training that he and Eggsy and all other trainees went through. They're supposed to be lifelong friends. And the same goes for Eggsy. Couldn't Eggsy use the moment when Harry had to confront his mother about the death of Eggsy's father? Or some of the other really difficult times that they had, when Harry heard that the head of Kingsman was, in fact, gone bad. And as far as the personal sacrifice of Merlin for the whole, success of the mission, I feel like it's just really bad and not very well thought out, and the pacing doesn't actually draw that much attention to it, because by the end of the movie, you're all caught up in these, cool fight scenes as opposed to mourning him. And again, you'd think with all the cool gadgets they have that they'd be able to, get him off the mine, or, that the giant fucking baseball bat that's supposed to be a minesweeper would have, beeped, because it's supposed to, detect mines. That's his whole point. Ugh. Be that as it may, the personal sacrifice isn't tied together as clearly throughout the movie as either theme is in Kingsman #1. So Kingsman 2 has a really strong message. America's war on drugs is bad. We literally leave Britain and go to America in order to make this point. We don't have a really strong secondary theme. If you're aware of one, I'd be happy to hear it. I just don't really see it in the movie. And because there's no tie-in between the war on drugs and either Eggsy's romantic relationship, aside from Tildy incidentally using drugs, and one of Eggsy's friends also using drugs, which is just emotional buy-in. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other issues with Kingsman 2, and I could probably go into them, and I'm sure other people on YouTube have. But I think that as far as the politics of Kingsman, this is the major issue that makes the movie kind of a flop for me, and far less compelling than the first one. There's a lot that they could have done, and there are some interesting elements and character design, especially about the American whose wife was killed because of incidental crime around drug use. If they had done something about, kind of that, it would have been a lot more interesting if they had tied that throughout a lot of the different characters in America, because I think that violence, gun violence, and violence around the drug trade is something that's really relatable to a lot of people and also can have a specificity in America because of guns and the way that we approach drugs as a personal feeling. But the movie didn't do that. So, I don't know. Maybe Kingsman 3 will be set in France, and we'll have something about French people fighting with baguettes, and that Trump is bad and xenophobic, and I'd probably watch that movie just to see French people fight with baguettes. But based on Kingsman 2, I don't know if they're going to have as strong of a political message, or if they're going to be able to tie multiple elements together in order to create a compelling movie that has a strong political or social message. Anyways, that's what I think, and you can think differently. I guess, maybe, but I'm probably right.